Welcome everyone, have a nice day. Now let's get back to today's story. The peaceful vacation Mara and her family had planned at Dreadmoor Lake was supposed to be a serene getaway. Nestled in the remote Black Hollow, the location promised stunning views and quiet relaxation. But beneath the tranquil surface of the lake, something sinister lurked, waiting for unsuspecting visitors. As strange rules, eerie warnings, and unexplainable events unfolded, Mara and her family were pulled into a nightmare far darker than they could have ever imagined. My family and I decided to take a vacation to Dreadmoor Lake this summer. Our son loves swimming, and our daughter is fascinated by boats, so it seemed like a perfect choice. I actually discovered the place through an online ad. A beautiful photo of a lake surrounded by pine trees caught my eye, with the words, "Visit Dreadmoor Lake" scrolling across the image. We checked out some Airbnbs in the area, and they were much cheaper than other places we'd considered. So we packed up and headed to Black Hollow. The Airbnb was just like the photos, a cozy saltbox-style house with a dock on the lake. The view from the family room was breathtaking, with large picture windows overlooking the lake. The house was filled with charming knickknacks, like signs pointing to the beach and a bottle filled with sea glass. We were thrilled with our choice and congratulated ourselves for planning such a great trip, until we saw the flyer. On the kitchen counter, there was a handwritten note from the owner, welcoming us to her home, but also advising us to check the rules on the next page. Apparently, the community had strict guidelines, and vacationers had even been banned from the beach before. Intrigued, my wife and I flipped the page. The top of the page read, in bold letters, "Rules for Dreadmoor Lake." A post-it was stuck on the page, reminding us to read all the rules carefully. I shrugged at my wife and started reading. Rule 1. Boats aren't allowed on the lake after dark. If you see one or even just a light on the water, call the Warden Graves. His number is listed below. Rule 2. The lake has many fish, crabs, and aquatic plants, so don't be alarmed if something brushes against your foot. However, if you feel something pulling you down, call for help immediately. Rule 3. Storms are rare, but if the siren goes off, leave the beach and shelter indoors. Do not get into a vehicle or try to leave. Just lock all doors and wait for the storm to pass. Rule 4. Swimming is prohibited in the far west section of the lake. If you see anyone there calling for help, ignore them. The lifeguards have already informed the Warden Graves. Rule 5. There are 5 lifeguards at Dreadmoor Lake, and their names and photos are listed on the next page. If you see anyone else claiming to be a lifeguard, call the Warden Graves immediately. Rule 6. If you ever see a reflection in the water that doesn't match reality, leave the beach immediately. Rule 7. A strange optical illusion occurs in the center of the lake. If you row into this area, you won't be able to see the shore. Don't call for help, as it may attract unwanted attention. Instead, shout, "Lost boat," and a lifeguard will guide you back. Rule 8. Turtles and fish often poke their heads above the water, but if you see anything larger, notify the lifeguards and leave the beach. Rule 9. Don't feed the ducks. Wow, I said to my wife, Mara. That's a lot of rules. I was starting to regret our decision to come here, but she reassured me that it wasn't unusual. Private lakes often have strict rules. So, I brushed it off, and we started planning our day. An hour later, we were driving to the beach. Although our house was lakefront, swimming was only allowed at the designated beach. There was even a sign near our backyard that read, "Tilted slightly to one side." Lilith and Damien ran down to the water right away, while Mara and I set up a little further back. Mara settled under the umbrella with a book. "I'm going to swim," I told her. "Want to join me?" She shook her head, so I waded out into the water. I've never been fond of lakes. The murky, greenish-brown water always makes me uneasy. I can't help but imagine snapping turtles, large fish, water snakes, and seaweed reaching up toward my feet. But this vacation was for the kids, not me. The water was cold, prickling my skin, but Lilith and Damien didn't seem to mind. They were already floating on pool noodles, arguing about Minecraft. I waded out further. The water got muddier, and I couldn't see the bottom, The sun was scorching my face, so I closed my eyes, held my breath, and dove underwater. Instantly, all sound disappeared. It was as though the water itself was absorbing the noise. I opened my eyes, but I could only see murky green-brown water. When I surfaced, the noise returned. Lilith and Damien were still floating by the rope, arguing. I dove again, and the quiet returned, but this time I heard something else. Singing. The singing wasn't muffled like the other sounds. It was clear, as if someone was humming right next to me. I surfaced, rubbing the water from my eyes. No one was near me. Lilith and Damien were still playing several yards away, and Mara was reading on the shore. Slowly, I tilted my head, putting one ear back underwater, and the singing returned, a soft, lilting melody. I frowned and pulled my head out of the water, startled. For a brief moment, I thought I saw something pale and white floating next to me, the size and shape of a person. But when I looked again, there was nothing. "Whoa, Dad, you okay?" Damien asked. "Yeah," I replied, my eyes still scanning the water. "Did the rules mention anything about singing?" "I don't know." He shrugged. "Ask Mom." I tilted my head underwater again, but this time, there was nothing. I convinced the kids to take a break and sit with me for a while. I told Mara about the singing. "That's weird," she said. "But I don't remember the rules mentioning anything like that." I tried to shake off the feeling, and after a while, we all got back in the water. Mara eventually joined us, and we spent the afternoon floating under the bright blue sky. The incident faded from my mind, and I started to understand why the lake was called Serenity. It was peaceful. We went home, ate dinner, and went to bed early. As I drifted off, I was convinced we were going to have the best vacation ever. How wrong I was. Around 2:00 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom. On my way back, something outside the window caught my eye. There was a light on the water, like someone was out in a boat. That was definitely one of the rules, no boating after dark. I watched the light bobbing gently on the lake, then went downstairs and called the Warden Graves. A man answered after the third ring. "Hello?" he asked, his voice groggy. "Hi. Sorry to bother you, but there's a boat on the lake, and the rules said to report it." I glanced back at the window, and my heart skipped a beat. The light was closer. A lot closer. Maybe only 20 yards from the shore. "It's heading toward our house," I said. The man's voice immediately changed. "Listen carefully," he whispered. "Get everyone into a room without windows, lock the door, and don't come out until I call you back." "But," I started to protest. The phone beeped in my ear. The call had ended. My heart began to pound. I ran to the kids' bedroom first and woke them up, ushering them into the bathroom. "What are you doing?" Lilith complained as she stumbled across the hallway. I told her to just stay in the bathroom with Damien while I got their mom. I ran to Mara, shook her awake, and led her to the bathroom too. By now, I could tell the light was incredibly close. It was shining through the curtains drawn over the bedroom windows. Just for good measure, I shielded my eyes from the windows as we walked across the hall, instructing Mara to do the same. We made it into the bathroom, the four of us squashed in the tiny space, and I locked the door. "What's going on?" Damien asked, clearly afraid. "Nothing," I replied. "There's just someone out there, but the Warden Graves is coming. He's going to deal with it, but he told us to stay in here. Okay? Just some teenagers causing trouble, trying to rob people or something." As we stood there, huddled in the dark, humid bathroom, I noticed that light was coming from under the crack of the door. It was so bright, like someone was holding a spotlight up to the windows. "Don't look at the light," I told them. Even though the rules hadn't said that, it just felt natural. There was something horribly off here. About a minute later, the light cut out. Seconds later, my phone rang. It was the Warden Graves telling me that he dealt with it, that it was just some kids trying to drink out of view of their parents. You know how it is, with teenagers in the summer. They get up to all kinds of trouble. His voice was smooth and slick. A completely different tone than he'd had before. I could tell he was lying. The next morning, Mara and I got into a fight. "I think we should go home," I told her. "What?" "Just because of those kids." "Yeah," I replied. "What if they break in? What if they kidnap Damien or Lilith? We spent $500 on this place, Nick. It's not refundable." "So, what? We were just gonna lose it all?" "Yeah, if that means staying alive." A dramatic eye roll and sigh from Mara. To give her credit, I was always anxious about safety. I was the kind of guy who checked locks 5 times before going to sleep. I set up security cameras around our house. Even for this vacation, I'd ruled out a few locations on account of being unsafe. Like Gravewater Cliffs, which has a huge cliff unprotected by a guardrail. So while I was right this time, Mara's skepticism wasn't totally out of left field. "The kids are going to be so disappointed if we leave," Mara finally said, her tone softening. "They were having so much fun here, and Lilith was so excited for that paddleboat ride." We talked it over more, and eventually, I was persuaded to stay. Of course. Now I wish that I hadn't listened to her. I wish I'd grabbed the kids and forced us all to go home, even if it meant them whining and moaning the entire 4-hour drive. But that morning, I had no idea the horrors that awaited us. That afternoon, we decided to rent the paddleboat. The entire family out on the lake, in 90-degree weather, sounds fun, doesn't it? But Lilith really wanted to go. So I figured we might as well get it over with now. The 4 of us climbed in, the boat rocking slightly in the dark water. At least it wasn't a canoe, I told myself. I couldn't stand the way those things threatened to tip at the slightest movement. Lilith and Mara steered us first, to the shoreline at the opposite end of the lake. I'll admit that was kind of cool, seeing the deep forest from the water, all the fine little squirrels and chipmunks scurrying in the underbrush, in the cool of the shade. We even passed the forbidden swimming area. A bright red rope cordoned off the area, and in the middle floated an orange buoy with a sign that read, "No swimming." There were 2 signs at the shoreline as well, faded in the sun, letters partially peeling off. Lilith giggled. "Look, Mom, it looks like that one says, 'Oh, swimming,' not 'no swimming.'" "That's nice," Mara clearly not amused. We paddled past our own dock, and by some long reeds that held some fish. Then, mercifully, the boat ride was over. It was time to go back to shore. That's when everything went horribly wrong. Damien and I were looking down at our phones as Mara and Lilith steered us back across the lake. It was then that I heard Mara's voice, slightly scared. How do we get back?" I looked up and realized I couldn't see the shoreline anymore. Just dark, muddy water extending in every direction, reflecting the hot summer sun. "What the hell?" I whispered. And then I remembered the rules. There was that one part of the lake in the middle, with the weird optical illusion. You wouldn't be able to see the shore, the rules had said. What were we supposed to do? Again? Call for the lifeguards? Call for help? "I think we came from that way," Damien said, pointing in a random direction. "No, it's definitely that way," Lilith replied. "Do you have a compass?" Mara asked me. "Why would I just be carrying around a compass?" I replied, "Pace," scowling at her. We argued for a few minutes. The water gently lapped at the plastic sides of the paddleboat. The shore did not come into view. The kids began to panic. Lilith cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted, "Help!" That made me remember. "No, stop," I shouted, grabbing her hands. "What?" she replied. "The rules said don't call for help," I replied. "We're supposed to shout 'Lost boat.'" I cupped my hands around my mouth and shouted, as loud as I could, "Hey! Lost boat!" And then motion caught my eye. I turned to see waves in the lake, as if something was moving just beneath the surface. The waves were making a beeline for our boat. "What's that?" Damien asked, his voice filled with fear. "Lost boat," I screamed, my voice echoing across the dark water. "Lost boat." The water churned. Whatever was under the surface was only a few yards away. I grabbed Lilith and Damien's hands. Mara did the same. "Don't let go of my hand," I asked. "Whatever you do, don't let go." "Daddy," Lilith started, her voice breaking. And then it happened. The thing under the water collided with the side of our boat. I could see a split-second glimpse of whitish skin under the waves. And then, the boat was rocking wildly back and forth, water spraying into the air. Lilith screamed. Mara gripped the kid's hands tighter. Lost screamed. Crack. The boat rocked wildly. Mara's entire body lurched backwards. If we weren't all holding hands, she would have fallen into the water. Lost boat, she shouted, joining me. Lost boat, thwack. The impact came from directly under the boat, and this time, it was too much. The boat flipped over, and the four of us plunged into the cold water. No sound, just as before. Only cold, murky water, pressing in on all directions. I opened my eyes and looked around in the blurry darkness. Miraculously, both kids were still holding my hands. I looked up, and I could see the dark shape of the paddleboat floating above us, and another light shape, too blurry to make out. Mara? I thought. Oh no. She let go. I kicked right, tugging on my kids' hands, pulling them away from the boat. Then I kicked towards the surface. Both kids surfaced, gasping for air. But Mara didn't. A soft splash sounded behind me, but it wasn't Mara. Several yards away, a lifeguard was frantically rowing towards us in a yellow rescue raft. Go to the raft, I shouted, before diving back under the water. I had to find Mara. I dove under and opened my eyes, scanning the blurry, murky water. It took me only a few seconds to find her. A whitish shape among the dark water, floating motionless, slowly descending. I kicked towards her, my heart pounding. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop until I got to her. I reached out and grabbed her arm. It wasn't Mara. The skin was too loose on her wrist, shifting and sliding under my fingertips. I looked up towards the person's face, and even though everything was still so blurry, I saw there was something horribly wrong with it. Where there should have been eyes, there were just two gaping black holes, staring at me. And it looked like it was smiling. A blurry, grinning mouth stretching across its face. Forgetting I was underwater, I opened my mouth and let out a scream. Bubbles erupted from my mouth, streaming towards the surface. And then something grabbed me by the arm. No, my head broke the surface. I coughed. I gasped. I wheezed. The lifeguard dragged me up onto the raft. But Mara, I choked. She's still down there. No, she isn't it. I turned around to see Mara at the front of the raft, her arms around both the kids. The lifeguard began to paddle frantically, kicking up water. I stared at the overturned paddleboat, slowly sinking, the dark surface of the water, reflecting the summer sun. I didn't see any waves, any shape swimming towards us. After a minute, I saw the shoreline again. The noisy beach, the kids running to and fro, the teenagers splashing each other. It was like it suddenly blinked into existence. The sound, the sights, everything returning all at once. I didn't spend any time wondering how that could be possible. We were safe, and that's all that mattered. We ran back to the car, cold and shaking. We didn't say a word as I drove us back to the Airbnb. As soon as I parked the car, I turned to the three of them. "We're leaving," I announced. "Now." Mara didn't fight me this time. We grabbed our stuff as quickly as we could, throwing it haphazardly into our bags and piling them up at the door. We worked quickly, silently. We all knew we had to get out of here, but then it happened. A droning, high-pitched sound pierced the air, rattling the windows. The storm siren. I ran to the window. Outside, I could see the dark storm clouds rolling in, as thick and black as night, clustering over the lake, as if it was some sort of magnet for them. My heart hammered in my chest. The rules were perfectly clear on this one. Stay inside. Do not get in a vehicle. Do not try to go anywhere. Stay inside until the storm passes. Mara ran over to the door, picking up our bags. I don't care about the stupid rules. We were leaving now. No, we can tea. We have to stay inside until the storm is over. She stared at me for what seemed like an eternity. Then she dropped the bags and drew the deadbolt. We went around the house, double-checking that every window and door was locked. Then we huddled in the family room, in front of the big picture window that looked out over the lake. Storm warning. A mechanical voice sounded over the droning siren. Find shelter immediately. Mara squeezed my hand. The rain started, sheets of it pelting down onto the water, turning the surface from smooth glass to a war of ripples. So much for serenity. The storm siren droned on for a few more seconds, the pitch eerily turning downwards, sounding like a horribly off-key song. And then there was silence, except for the rain drumming on the roof. Will they let us know when the storm is over? Will the siren go off again? Lilith asked, not taking her eyes off the lake. I don't know, I replied. I guess we can leave when the rain stops. A finger of lightning shot across the sky, fracturing into 1,000 pieces. I counted the seconds. 6 seconds later, the thunder hit. Don't panic, I told the kids, as Lilith began to whimper. In the dim light, I stumbled over to the kitchen and began pulling out drawers, looking for a flashlight, a candle, matches, anything. Another clap of thunder sounded, rattling the windows. On the 4th drawer, I found a lighter. After another minute, I found a few long, fancy-looking candles and a pewter candelabra. I lit them and set it on the floor in front of us. The orange flames flickered and brightened, casting the entire place in strange shadows that shivered and shuddered. We just have to wait out the storm, I told them. So the 4 of us sat there, staring out at the lake, watching the storm. The rain let up slightly, but then the lightning started up again with a vengeance, streaking across the sky. I sat there, holding Mara's hand, waiting for it to pass. And then I saw something that didn't make sense. Next to the dock, there was a dark reflection in the water, as if someone was standing on the dock, dressed head to toe in black, with sickly white skin. Except there was no one there. The rules said something about that. But what? My brain was so fried with panic, I didn't remember. I got up and ran to the sheet of paper on the counter, scanning the rules. Okay, all it said was leave the beach immediately. We weren't on the beach, so we should be okay. I sat back down on the couch, staring at the reflection. Something wrong? Mara asked. Do you see that? I pointed to the reflection. Before she could answer, it moved. It was walking towards the shore. Walking towards us. We're safe. The rules just said stay off the beach. I told myself, we're safe. The reflection disappeared from the water as it stepped off the dock and into our backyard. And as it got closer, I noticed there was a space in the pelting rain. Something roughly human-shaped that the rain was bouncing off rather than going through. Dad, Damien started. Shh, I replied. The creature, the person, the ghost, whatever it was, stood outside the window for several minutes. When the rain let up, it was nearly invisible, but as soon as it began to pelt down again, I could see it clearly. When lightning flashed across the sky, I could almost see the contours of its pale face, its black dress rippling in the wind, its long hair wet and matted against its shoulders. I told myself it was just my imagination, but I knew it wasn't. After several more minutes, I couldn't take it. Sitting here, watching this thing stand in the rain, watching us. I got up and began to pace the room. I checked my phone, no service. I forced myself not to look at the window, and instead focused on the tiniest details of the cabin, like the knots in the wood that seemed to look like faces, the fake succulent on the coffee table, the beach this way sign, which seemed more of a threat now, the books on the shelf against the wall. Then I stopped. There was one book that stuck out like a sore thumb. It was much, much older than the others. Cloth, teal cover, with gold embossed lettering on the spine, read The History of Dreadmoor Lake. I pulled it out and flipped it open. My heart dropped as I scanned the first page. In total, 32 people have gone missing at Dreadmoor Lake since 1900. Despite the lake being dredged several times, no bodies have ever been found. Those more inclined to the supernatural believe the lake is cursed. I flipped the page. There was a photo of a pale woman in a long, fluttery black dress with the caption, Young Widow, Drowned, 1918. Suspected murder, killer, never found. Next page. 3 men in a small motorboat, lost in storm. 1962. Next page. Dad? Lilith asked, her voice shaking. I looked up, and all the blood drained out of my face. Mara. No. No. Mara's eyes were sunken back into her eye sockets, hidden in deep shadow. Her skin was a sickly white, drooping and hanging off her face like it was too loose for her skull. She looked like the creature I saw on the lake. Not blurry, this time. As the candlelight flickered over her face, all traces of Mara faded away. Her eyes sunk further back until I couldn't see them anymore. Just empty pits of darkness, staring at me. Her mouth widened into a smile, revealing rows of needle-like piranha teeth. "Run!" I screamed, lunging toward Damien and Lilith and grabbing them by the arms. The creature made a guttural gasping sound. Then, with a wet slap, it fell on its hands and knees to the floor. It made its way towards us, grinning all the while, empty eye sockets staring up at us. I scrambled to unlock the deadbolt. The storm wasn't over, but as soon as the door was open, we ran. We made it to the car. Doors slammed. Engine revved. I pulled out onto the road, kicking up gravel as I hit the gas. Lilith and Damien sobbed in the backseat. I kept my eyes on the road, numb, my only focus to get my kids safely out of Dreadmoor Lake as soon as possible. And that's my story. My wife was the 33rd life claimed by Dreadmoor Lake. So, if you ever see an ad for a beautiful lake among deep wilderness, promising amazing sunsets and fun for the whole family, don't go. I beg you, don't go. The lake has claimed enough victims. What was meant to be a dream vacation became a fight for survival as Dreadmoor Lake revealed its true nature. By the time Mara realized the extent of the lake's curse, it was too late to escape unscathed. With her family on the line, the question remained, would they survive the night? Or would they become the lake's next victims? As they fled Black Hollow, one thing was certain, the horrors of Dreadmoor Lake would haunt them forever. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more. Your support means the world to me.